Alright, the box is looking emptier. The next step in the build is the tail section, the vertical and horizontal stabilizer. First thing to do is to cut out the covering from there's a notch here and a notch here on both sides, and then there's a little notch here to cut out the covering from that will house this tab here. I did have to put the push rod tubes back into the proper locations. Should be straightforward. Again, this is, I mentioned this before, this is pretty much the exact same build as the Dauntless dive bomber. And then the last step we did is the wing. It's up on its little pedestal now with the rest of the wings, and we'll get to the retracts for that to finish the wing up totally once the retracts come in. The covering from the slots for the horizontal and vertical stabilizer are removed, both sides, and then on the horizontal stabilizer, this will fit in there, something like that, tight fit. But next steps is to insert the horizontal stabilizer into its slots, and it is a good tight fit, which is good. Alright, with the horizontal stabilizer in place, to make sure it's square to the aircraft, I have to measure from the corner, east corner, to the spot up on the front, make sure that's the same distance. And once that is determined, I have to mark on both sides and on the bottom, I believe, as well. Take this back out, cut the covering out. That way it's, when it's glued, it will be balsa wood to balsa wood. So I'll work on getting these measurements, getting it centered and marked. I have a horizontal stabilizer in place. What I did, got a measuring tape. I measured from the corner of the stabilizer to the center line behind the cockpit. That came out to be 25 inches. Verified both sides, 25. I also went from the end up to the firewall, which was 36 1/4, and I measured for the fuselage to the edge or end of the stabilizer, 12 1/4, 12 1/4 on both sides. Now what I need to do is mark the top and bottom with pencil. Take the stabilizer out, cut away the covering, put it back in place and glue it. So I'll mark the lines. Actually, I'll just do that now while I have this on. Get the pencil. Mark both sides. Watch the rod here. And take this back out and do the cut the covering away. So we'll be back. I have the covering cut off from the center section of the horizontal stabilizer, bottom and top. And while I had this out, cut out or off the covering, which will be cut off when I install this, the tab on the vertical, I just want to make sure that would fit while I had the horizontal stabilizer out. So the next step is to put it back in. I'll put it back in, double check the measurements again, and then glue it in place. It does call for a thin CA, which the thin CA I had is dried up, so I ordered some. I have a horizontal stabilizer in place. It's not glued. I will wait for the thin CA to arrive. I did install the vertical stabilizer. I made sure it was 90 degrees to the tail. Both sides. Obviously it's going to be one side is going to be on the other. And then I made sure it was flush with the bottom of the fuselage straight up for the rudder. I will draw lines like I did here. Draw lines both sides and cut out the covering from below that line, and then that will be ready to glue in place once this is glued in place. I have the covering off the bottom of the vertical stabilizer, both sides, and we'll wait to install it until I get the horizontal stabilizer glued in place. Thin CA has arrived, and I have glued the horizontal stabilizer in place by putting in glue inside the fuselage to the stabilizer on inside both sides on the outside and underneath. Next step would be gluing the vertical stabilizer in place, which I will do next with probably use 30-minute epoxy for this. Vertical stabilizer is glued in place. I did use epoxy like I mentioned before. Let this glue dry, the epoxy dry, and then we'll proceed to installing the elevators and the rudder. Glue those in place. All right, next step in the build is to install the elevators. Same process for both sides. I'm just going to show you the process on one side. Take the elevator, hinges are already installed in the elevator. Slide the hinges into the slots and the stab. Make sure the end is even. Then add a little bit of CA to the hinges. top side and bottom side, elevator and stab side. And don't make a mess like I just did. I need to get, I think, alcohol. Let's get that off before it completely dries. Wipe it off. Or actually, not wipe it off, but move the elevator so it doesn't stick in one spot. I'll do the same for the underneath. This time, elevator up. And it's glued in place. Let that set for a minute. Then we'll do a tug check. Make sure all is good. And we'll do the same for the other side. I'll go ahead and do the other side as well. Elevator is already on. You can add a thin layer of petroleum jelly on the stabilizer and elevator so the elevator doesn't get glued on the stab in the up or down position. I think I'm, besides making a drop over here in the other one, I think it'll be okay without doing that. So again, make sure it's even on the sides. Hold the elevator down. These cloth hinges, the CA will soak into it and will soak into both sides to have a good firm connection. And do the same for the bottom. Move the elevator so it doesn't stick in place. That's where the petroleum jelly would come in handy. Let that sit for a couple minutes. The other side should be good. Do a tug, gentle tug on it. Not coming out. So good seal. And next step would be the rudder. Put that in place. Make sure it's even up here at the top. This will have to turn on its side a little bit. The CA. And do the same for the other side. Move the rudder, make sure it's all good. The elevator's good. Let this set for another minute or so. Then we'll do a tug test on that. Make sure all is good. I think it looks good all the way around. And that should do the assembly, or complete this assembly for the tail section, minus the control horn, servos,